Hello, everyone. Geoffrey Nance here. Welcome to Word Wednesday. This is where we have an opportunity to look at the Word, the Bible, and then apply it to different areas of our life. In this particular segment, we are talking about business principles from the Bible. We'll be spending a few weeks there. And most people can kind of look at the Bible and say, okay, so it's there for spiritual things. We talked about this last week. It is. It is intended for that. But so much more than that. And we see that Jesus grew in wisdom, in stature, and in favor with God and with man. And that is pretty much what sums up his life from about age 12 to 30. He grew in wisdom, he grew in stature, and he grew in favor with God and with man. And we know that basically during that time, he would have been learning a craft, and he would have been likely learning that from his father or another family member. And we know that his skill set was a carpenter. And so he was making a living as a carpenter. He would make stuff and he would sell stuff. And that is how he would support himself. And that's how most of us support ourselves. We have some kind of a job where we are paid to do a service, and then we go and do whatever we desire with that money. So, as we think about business principles from the Bible, there are many, many things here. And the one that I was really drawn to for today actually goes all the way back to Genesis. And so I'm going to read this passage to you guys, but you're familiar with it, I'm pretty certain. And this is about Joseph when he is in Egypt. He has been in prison, and then Pharaoh has this dream that nobody can interpret. And they remember, oh, that's right, this guy in prison, he can interpret dreams. Maybe he can figure out what the dream is. So pretty much as it comes out, all right, you're going to have 7 big fat cows. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's 7 years of growth and prosperity. All right, and then all of a sudden, I've got these little weak, scrawny, ugly looking cows, and they come and they eat up the big fat ones. What's going on with that? It kind of scares Pharaoh. He doesn't know what to make of that. And then Joseph interprets it, and he's like, "Hey, that means 7 years of famine are coming." And after he does this interpretation, pretty much everybody looks around and goes, "Yeah, that sounds good to me too." And Pharaoh asks a question. He goes, does anybody else have any objection to what he's saying? Everybody's like, no, 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 that could be right. That could be good. Yeah. And so Pharaoh's like, all right, none of you jokers know what's going on here. So I'm going to put this guy in charge. So Joseph, you go straight from jail to being second in command here of all of Egypt. It's a that in of itself is a pretty incredible story. Um, but Joseph has to have a plan, guys. He has to have a plan now. So just the fact that he interpreted the dream doesn't mean okay that much. I mean, it's good, right? That's helpful. From a government perspective, Pharaoh, it's nice to be like, okay, well, let's prepare for this. Let's see if there's any way to take care of our people. He's obviously looking at it from a somewhat selfish perspective, going, I need to prepare my legacy. I don't want to be known as the Pharaoh who killed all of his people because he wasn't prepared for a rare famine. So some of this was legacy for this Pharaoh, but some of it was probably just like, hey, let me take care of my people, which is one of the roles of government there is to provide protection and an opportunity for their people. So it says in this is chapter 41 here, verse 46. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. In each city, he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain, like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Before the years of famine came, two sons were born to him. All right, so he named them after God's, blessing and provision. Then in verse 53, the 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt, there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened the storehouses. Watch this. Sold grain to the Egyptians. Say what? When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. For the famine was severe throughout Egypt, and all the countries came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe in all the world. Guys, in this time, it seems even more interesting, perhaps even the word prevalent, for us to really think through what a passage like this means to us. How can we extract information from this from a business principle? Well, one of the things that it's important to point out here is Joseph had a plan. He executed that plan. He was prepared for what was to come. And then when this severe time of famine came and people were going to starve, notice that Joseph did not give the grain away. It wasn't free. Mm-mm. He had something really good. He had something the people really needed, and he sold it. And the people came and they bought it. And what we don't see from this passage is they complained about this transaction. That interesting to anybody else? I mean, does that line up with what you feel like where we are today in our society? Where people feel like they ought to pay for things that they need? Or are we in a state right now where people are like, I don't understand why everything isn't free? Guys, I want you to understand, these people would have died if Joseph had not had the foresight to store up the grain, to then create storehouses, enough storehouses, so much so that he just stopped counting how much they had to prepare for this. And these people, in their darkest times of need, came to him, and rather than giving it away, he sold that to the people. Guys, this is an important principle that I think is not worth missing for us, because it is clearly relevant to where we are in our society. As we drift further and further away from this capitalist mindset, where if you have a good product, you ought to be able to sell that product, and then people ought to appreciate the opportunity to buy that product. As we get further and further away from that, it's really important that we realize this is a biblical principle. These people were in dire circumstances, and they still understood, yeah, you know what? If I'm going to provide for my family, I'm going to have to go and buy this grain, and they were thankful for that. People often talk about this idea that they don't like salesmen. It's really not true, right? It's not true. And the reason I know it's not true is because if you were to go to a grocery store and you went and filled up your cart, and then you got to the front and the person said, "Yeah, I'm not going to sell any of this to you." Well, you're going to give it to me free? No. I'm just not going to let you have it. I'm not going to let you buy it. You'd be upset. You would be upset that that person would not sell you the things that you wanted. Why? Because they have a product that you desire, and you're willing to exchange your money for their product. This is really a good biblical model for us, guys. When we say we don't like salesmen, it's normally because we don't like somebody trying to entice us or make us feel like we're having to buy something that doesn't benefit us. In any type of business, it ought to be this phrase right here: mutually beneficial. Was Joseph selling that grain to these people mutually beneficial? The answer is absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, Joseph benefited, Pharaoh benefited, the country benefited, but the people benefited too. They had food to eat, without which they would have starved. Okay. So mutually beneficial. If you have a product that you feel like would benefit other people, it is okay to sell it. Joseph did so in their greatest time of need. I hear people say from time to time, I don't understand why you've got this education and you claim to be Christians. Why don't you just give it away? It's not really a biblical business model. You won't stay in business very long if you just give away your product. All right? So if we have education and we believe we have a good product, if it's mutually beneficial, then it's good for us to make it available to you at a reasonable price. But if you mutually benefit from it, you feel like that is a good thing for you and for us. And as a company, we're trying to live by that model. We want to make educational products available to you, financial educational products available to you, but at a price. Much like when you go to college or you go to graduate school, they're making education available to you at a price. And guys, each school is different. I've got a son that's a junior in high school. He's looking at colleges right now, and you know what? Some schools cost more than others. Is it a good value? We'll see. We'll see. Because ultimately, it's like, well, what do I get out of it? How does it benefit me in the long run, or how does it benefit him by going? Am I going to be able to use that education? And how so? So as we move forward, we're going to continue to look at some of these things. And I fully expect that some of you guys are going to be like, oh man, this kind of makes me uncomfortable. But don't look at it and say, well, I don't know if I like what Geoffrey's saying. Ask yourself a deeper question: do I like what the Bible is saying? Okay, because that's ultimately what matters, right? The Word of God is living and active. It's sharper than a double-edged sword, and it pierces. It can divide between bone and marrow. I mean, it can cut sharp, and I'm okay with us really spending time talking about the Word, being honest with what it says, and then looking at it to say, man, is the Bible even broader than I anticipated? Because maybe I put the Bible in a box. And really, there's a lot more to it and applies to a lot more areas of our life than I realized. Because we can't just be one way on Sunday and then be a different way throughout the week. That's ridiculous, right? No, that's hypocrisy. We can't do that. Well, then do you think that since God knew that people would be working, you think about it. This goes back to Genesis, guys. When Adam and Eve sinned, God said, all right, now you're going to work the land, which you've been able to do, but now it's going to be by the sweat of your brow. It's going to be hard now. Well, that means that there was a time when he was working, it was easy. It's not now. Still, that was God's plan, even for Adam, that, yeah, you're going to work. And the Bible says, if you don't work, you don't eat. It's laid out there. All right. So we're going to look into these principles, and then we're going to try to apply them and just realize, all right, so it applies to us. Next week, we're gonna look at what does God desire from me as a worker. Right. So if I'm working for somebody else, how does God want me to approach that? What does the Bible say about that? So we'll look at that a little bit more next week. Appreciate you guys being on with us. I want to make you aware that we have an opportunity for you to attend an event. It's a free event, right? So if you want to come check this out, I'm going to give you some details as to what is entailed in this event. but it's called our Word on Investing Summit. It's business principles. It's biblically oriented, and it's the Word on Investing Summit. And if you guys are interested in learning more about that, we sure would be excited to have you join us. This is going to be a full weekend long thing. It's, let's see, next weekend. So that's going to be 23rd and 24th. So you can learn more about that. You can visit tradeway.com. And if you want to get some more details, we'll be glad to provide those for you. You can actually contact support at tradeway.com if you're interested in learning more about what this event really entails and how it might be able to benefit you. Sure would be glad to have you join. Thanks for being a part of this today, guys. Look forward to you being with us again next week as we look at the worker. What is the worker's role from a biblical perspective? We're going to check that out next week. See you guys then.